And we finally get to the book of Deuteronomy. Deuteronomy, this is session 1 of the book of Deuteronomy. And I pray, Father Yahuwah, that you will take us through the book of your word, because we will see now what Deuteronomy means. And we ask you in these last days, here where we are in the tribulation period, where the birth pains of the end times are starting to happen all around us and inside our own homes and schools and workplaces and governments and countries. We ask that your words, your Devarim, your Dabar, will indeed carry us through as you prophesied when we are in the last days and we remember your words. You will regather us again, and we can trust you and understand that you will be with us through Bamidbar, through the book of Numbers, through the wilderness, as you brought us Exodus out of Egypt, and as you've spoken your word from the beginning, Bereshit. We learn everything we need to know to complete this journey, even though it might look so difficult and the way ahead looks so far, and the Amalekites and the Egyptians and the Canaanites, the enemies are so many, and the system in which we are so oppressive. We know that through your words we will find life, and we will trust on it, and our hope is set upon your word that became flesh, to return to this earth and claim his kingdom back and bring us into a time of shalom, a time where the Son of David will reign in peace. And we can look forward to that while we go through the wilderness and through persecution and through oppression and through sometimes when we fear our enemies. But you teach us in the book of Psalms 119 that although we fear our enemies, you are greater than them, and we can overcome the enemy with the blood of the Lamb and the testimony of Yeshua. And the testimony of Yeshua is the prophets. It is the words that you have written through your prophets, of which one we are now starting on a journey with in the book of Deuteronomy. Devarim. All right, so Deuteronomy, as we've seen before, every time a book gets a name, that name can always be found in the first couple of words of that book. So Deuteronomy 1 verse 1 says, "These are the words which Moses spoke." In Hebrew, these are the Devarim that Moses spoke. The Devar, the Dabar. So in Hebrew, the V sound and the B sound is actually very similar. It can be used interchangeably. You'll hear that most people that read translations will say Abraham, but you'll hear many Jews will say Avraham. So whether we say Abba or Ava, the V or the B is interchangeable. And the same with Shabbat. Shabbat is with a B, and yet we have the feast of Shavuot, which is with a V. And you can hear Shabbat in the words Shavuot, because Shavuot has got to do with 7 Shabbats. So whether you use the B sound or the V sound, it still gives the same meaning. So in Hebrew, the word for word, the word that is used to translate word from, is Dabar. So in Strong's, the word for word is Strong's H1697, and that is Dabar, D-A-B-A-R, Dabar. And it means by implication a word as a spoken thing. A word as a spoken thing. Do you remember when we were young, we always said when we played magic games, we said Abracadabra. And then, Abracadabra, I change you into a frog. And yeah, that's how we played as kids. Now, the words Abracadabra has a magical meaning. A meaning that by speaking this spell, this words Abracadabra that is a spell, something magical will happen because there is power in the spell. When you say the spell, when you put the spell out, then there's magic in it and things can change. And We remember all the movies we saw when we were young, all the magical things, Abracadabra, and then they changed something, and then they did some magic trick. But listen carefully to the words. Listen, Abracadabra. I'm going to say it again. Abracadabra. 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 Now I'm going to say the words again, but this time with the original meaning. Abba ke Dabar. So from Abba ke Dabar, we got the occult magic words, our Father's words that they stole and twisted, and they said Abracadabra. So Abba ke Dabar. Now Dabar means words. Abba means our Father in heaven. So Abba ke Dabar means the words of our Father. The Dabar of Abba. Abba's Dabar. Abba's words. Father Yahuwah's words. So, of course there's magic in the words of God. There's magic in Abba's Devarim. Abba's Dabar. Father Yahuwah's words. But it's funny and amazing how the occult world stole this Hebrew sentence and claimed it for their own magic spells. Isn't it amazing? So if you hear anybody say again, Abracadabra, then you know where it came from. Originally, in the original language, it was the magic, the power, the authority of the words of Almighty God, Yahuwah Elohim. Abba ke Devarim. Dabar is a single word. Debarim is words in the plural. And that is the name of this book of Deuteronomy. In the Hebrew, this book is called Devarim. So remember again, if you say Devarim or Debarim, or the V or the B, it's the same. Okay, so let's read together the words of our Father, starting with Devarim, chapter 1, verse 1. These are the words that Moses spoke to all of Israel, beyond the Jordan River in the wilderness, in the plain opposite the Sea of Reeds, between Paran and Tophel and Lavan and Hatzeroth and Dizahava. So in this first sentence, there's so much hidden. Because remember now the book of Deuteronomy is where Moses takes time. This is now where they are at the end of their 40-year journey. And they're on the way to go into the promised land with the new generation, with the last generation. So as we listen to the words, the Dabar, that Moses is speaking to the whole congregation of Israel on this side of the Jordan, on this side of the promised land, where we are still in exile, we are still in the wilderness, we are not yet in the promised land. Yes, we are going through much tough times, but we need to listen in these days, especially we need to listen to the words of Moses that God gave him to speak to us. Because if we don't, we are not, just like our forefathers, we will not inherit the promised land. And fear and trembling and disbelief or unbelief and disobedience and rebellion might come up in our hearts, and we might turn back to Egypt, and we might decide it's just safer and better for us to rather be part of this Egyptian system. We just don't have the wisdom or the strength or the guts, the chutzpah. We just don't have it to continue into this promised land. That's why we have to stop here. After the long journey from Genesis through Exodus, through Leviticus, through Numbers, we have to stop here and get a quick history lesson. Sorry, it's not going to be quick. The book of Deuteronomy is the most amazing book. I love it. And you're going to get to love this book, because this book is the love letter, the words of your God that he wrote to you so you can read it as a love letter. Oh, it's beautiful. You're going to see. Don't worry. So on this side of the Jordan, we are listening to Moses, and Moses is speaking to them in their time. But Moses is also speaking to us in our time, because we are in the same situation. And we need to have learned the lessons now. Enough of wanting to go back to Egypt. Enough of being scared of the Canaanites now. Enough of allowing the Amalekites to attack us from behind. Enough of being disobedient to God and rebellious against Moses. Enough of not listening to Joshua. Enough of it now. So we are standing here at the end of time. Remember, God said in Deuteronomy 4 verse 30, when you are in tribulation and all these things are come upon you, even in the last days. So here we are. We're in the last days of this journey. We are on this earth. And we are on the brink of doing our final war. The war with the Antichrist. And we have our soldier Joshua with us. And we have the Ruach and the burning, flaming column of fire with us. And we have the tabernacle with us. And we now need to... And we now need to be prepared to go into battle with Joshua. And really take our inheritance. And not be scared. So now we listen to the words. Because God says in the latter days, when you come to this point and you turn to Yahuwah your Elohim and you will be obedient unto his Devarim, then he will take us into the promised land. And the whole New Testament and the Old Testament confirms that we are that generation. There is a second Exodus. There is a repeat of everything that happened in the first Exodus. There is a repeat and there is a lesson and there is a teaching and there is a warning and there are instructions for us to follow. How can we know how to go into this last battle? And how can we endure through the tribulation if we don't learn the lesson that God has written up for us? He's given us the instruction manual. So we have to study it. Romans 15 verse 4. For whatsoever things were written before time, like here in the book of Deuteronomy and Exodus and Leviticus and Genesis, whatever things were written before time were written for our learning. Do you hear what Paul is telling you? All this stuff that was written before our time is written for our learning. Why? So that we, through patience and comfort of the Scriptures, might have hope. So the Scriptures that we are reading, that has been written before our time, we read it because in it we learn, through it we learn, but also we get our comfort through these writings in the Scriptures, through the words that's written down for us. And also, we get patience. Through these Scriptures, we get patience so that we can endure through the tough times of the tribulation and the persecution and the beast system that is pulling himself up every single day, more and more, all around the world and in our country. So, whatever things were written before our time was written for our learning, so that we, through patience and comfort of the Scriptures, might have hope. May your learning of these Scriptures give you the patience and the comfort that you need, so that you will have the hope of glory and the hope of the resurrection and the hope of salvation while we go through the wilderness journey. 1 Corinthians 10 verse 11. Now, all these things have happened unto them for examples. Okay, here in 1 Corinthians 10, Paul is talking about Israel in the first Exodus. And he says, everything that has happened unto them has happened for a reason, so that it can be written in the history books for an example for us. Who is us? Upon whom the ends of the world have come. Guy, listen again. Upon whom the end of the world has come. Do you remember Deuteronomy 4 said, when you come in the end of days, in the last days, when then you remember my words. And here Paul says, us who are at the end of the world, we need to read all these things that have happened to them, because it happened to them as an example for us who is in the end of the world. And it's written for us as our admonition. What is admonition? I admonish you, I instruct you, I teach you, I warn you. So all the things that has been written up and that has happened with these guys in the book of Deuteronomy is written for us as an example, so that we can be admonished and taught by this and warned by this and instructed by this to have hope and comfort and patience, so that we can have understanding, because we are the generation that is understanding this so much more. We've got a passion to learn this so much more, because we know, we understand, we are the people upon whom the ends of the world have come. We are the people that are in tribulation and that are in the last days. And we are the people that's turning back to God and that starts being obedient to his voice. Because God promised, we have a hope in his words, in his Dabar, in the promises that came out of his mouth. He promised us in Jeremiah 16 from verse 14, therefore behold, the days come, says Yahuwah, that it shall no longer be said, Yahuwah lives, that brought up the children of Israel out of the land of Egypt. So this is the biggest thing that has ever happened. God brought his nation out of the Egyptian system. It's a huge thing that happened. But there will come a time in the end when people will no longer even remember that huge, amazing thing that happened. They will no longer say, oh, do you remember how God brought Israel out of Egypt? Do you remember the Egyptian Pharaoh system that made slaves of God's people? Do you remember the plagues and the judgments of God? Do you remember how he saved his people with a Pesach lamb? Do you remember how he baptized them in the sea? Do you remember how he brought them through the wilderness into the promised land? We will no longer say that, because although that was so huge, it's going to be nothing. Listen to me. It is going to be nothing compared to the last generation that is now standing at the brink of going into the last war before we take up our inheritance in the promised land. It's nothing compared to that. Because God himself, his Devarim, his own words, says, the day will come that it will no longer be said, Yahuwah lives, that brought up the children of Israel out of the land of Egypt, but it will be said, Yahuwah lives, that brought up the children of Israel from the land of the north, and from all the lands where he has driven them. And I, Yahuwah who lives, will bring them again into their land that I gave unto their fathers. Where are we now? We are now. These are the words, Deuteronomy 1 verse 1. These are the words that Moses spoke to all of Israel. Remember, who's Israel? All of Israel is scattered all over the world. He is speaking this to us. Yeshua is the one that will bring back the lost sheep and will gather us again. We are beyond the Jordan River, in the wilderness, in the plain opposite the Sea of Reeds, between Paran and Tophel and Lavan, and Hatzoreth and Dizavah. We are here now. We are standing and listening to the words of Moses. We understand that we are in the end days. We are the last generation. We are the people for whom all these things have been written. And God is busy turning his people back to his covenant. And he's busy gathering his people out of Egypt and Babylon and bringing his spiritual Jerusalem back together. Although we are still physically scattered, he is already in the spirit making us echad. Yeshua said, I don't pray for the world. John 17. I pray for my people who is in the world. I'm coming back to you, Father. But these my people I'm leaving behind in the world. And I pray that you make them echad, as you and I are echad. Isn't that amazing? So we stand together and we listen to the Devarim of Yahuwah, because he promised he will bring the children of Israel from the land of the north and all the lands where he has driven them, just as he said in Deutoronomy, that he's going to scatter as his people. But in the last days, when we turn to his voice, he will gather us again. He says in Jeremiah 16 verse 16, Behold, I will send for many fishers, says Yahuwah, and they shall fish them for me. They shall fish my scattered Israel from all the lands wherein I have driven them, and wherein I have scattered them. And the fishers will bring my words to my lost sheep, and they will catch the 153 fish. You remember that, how those who were said of, they will not be my people, when they are gathered and when they obey again, they will be called sons of the living God. And that is 153 in the Hebrew Gematria. And Yeshua sent out his disciples to catch 153 fish. He will make us fishers of men, he said to his disciples and to us today. Go and spread the gospel into every tribe, nation and tongue, and fish for my people, and bring them back. And then of these people it will be said, no longer, do you remember a long time ago when Moses, by the hand of Moses, God brought up his people out of Egypt? No, of these people that are gathered by the Devarim, the word of God that became flesh, the Torah, the living Torah. When people return to obeying the Torah and understanding that the Torah was crucified for us on the cross to cover our disobedience, so that we can be restored to our Father and our sins can be covered and atoned for and can be forgiven, and the curse can be taken away from us that we inherited from Adam and Eve. When that happens, of this generation, it will be said, Yahuwah lives, who brought up all the scattered children of Israel from all these lands. He sent out fishers to go and catch them, and to fish for them, and to bring them home. Are you yet a fisher? If you have studied with me all the way up to today, you have to also become a fisherman. As I have been a fisherman, and as I have provided you with the bread of life, so you have to now start doing the same. And you can use these studies from Genesis for your own Bible study groups, for your own Facebook page. You can do whatever you want with them. You can make them your own. Use these studies to bring the words of life. Yeshua multiplied 2 fishes and 5 loaves of bread. Or was it 5 fishes and 2 loaves of bread? I can't remember. He increased that to feed all the hungry people, because he looked upon them and he got sad, and he said, they are like lost sheep without a shepherd. How many lost sheep are there in your community, in your family, in your neighborhood, in your church? Start fishing. Start serving the words, the Devarim of Yahuwah, your Abba. Not Abracadabra, not sun god, Christmas, Ishtar, pork, unkosher religion. Not Abracadabra, but Abba ke Devarim. Abba ke Dabar. Share the words of Abba and be a fisher of men, and help with this last day gathering, and provide hope and comfort and patience to your people, and teach them so that they can learn out of the examples that has been written up for us by a loving Abba.